Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into some fascinating source material, unpacking one of the biggest, most talked about health books of the last decade or so, Dr. William Davis's Wheat Belly. And we've got a lot to work with here, enthusiastic reader stories, diet plans, but also, importantly, some serious critical reviews and scientific responses. Our goal is pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Lay out the book's, well, often provocative claims, and immediately put them side by side with how the scientific community reacted. We want you to get the full picture. Fast.
absolutely. And it's necessary because the core idea here is huge. Davis, who's a cardiologist, isn't just tweaking dietary advice. He's basically saying modern wheat, the kind most of us eat every day, is fundamentally toxic.
Toxic is a strong word.
It is. He argues it's so different from ancient wheat that it acts like a metabolic poison. And he links it directly to, the explosion in obesity, heart disease, diabetes, the huge health crises.
Yeah.
It's a massive claim against a food that's, well, everywhere.
Okay, let's jump right into that core claim then. Because the thing that always shocks people is that blood sugar comparison he makes. He says modern wheat spikes blood sugar way more than you'd expect.
That's the one. It's probably the most quoted part of the book. He claims that eating just 2 slices of whole wheat bread can actually raise your blood glucose more than eating a typical candy bar.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. If it's true, it flips decades of nutritional advice on its head. The whole grains are always better idea.
Definitely a hard pill to swallow. So if these big blood sugar spikes keep happening, what's the physical result? We hear wheat belly all the time. What's the actual mechanism causing fat storage there?
Well, that huge sugar spike demands a huge insulin response from your body. Insulin's job is to get sugar out of the blood, but if it's constantly being slammed, like that's called hyperinsulinemia, your body starts becoming resistant to it. And high insulin basically sends a loud signal. Stop burning fat, start storing it, especially as visceral fat, the deep stuff around your organs in the abdomen. That whole cycle is what he calls the wheat belly.
And it gets even more intense. There's this whole angle about addiction, which is fascinating if you struggle with cravings. Is Davis really saying wheat acts like a drug?
He is, yeah. He points to specific proteins in wheat, derived from gluten, called wheat exorphins. They're a type of peptide.
Exorphins, okay.
And he claims these interact with opioid receptors in the brain, kind of like, well, low-grade opioids.
So that's the proposed link to cravings.
Exactly. That's his explanation for why people feel dependent on bread or pasta, why they get intense cravings, maybe overeat, and then feel tired afterwards. It adds this whole psychological layer. It's not just about calories, it's about breaking an addictive cycle.
Beyond the weight and the cravings, what other health problems does he connect to wheat? It seems pretty broad.
Oh, it's very broad. He links ongoing wheat consumption to a whole range of inflammatory issues and even autoimmune conditions. Things like rheumatoid arthritis, digestive problems like IBS, even in people without celiac disease. That's important common skin issues like eczema.
So really diverse conditions.
Yes. And in his clinical experience, he reported seeing dramatic improvements in all these things, plus stuff like lower cholesterol, just from cutting out wheat.
Okay, so if wheat is the bad guy, according to Davis, what's the fix? What does the actual wheat belly diet involve? Is it just ditching the toast and pasta?
That's a really key point people need to get. It's way more than just avoiding obvious wheat products. The diet removes all grains, not just wheat.
All grains, like rice, oats, corn too?
Yep, all of them. It's basically a pretty significant shift to a low-carb, whole food approach.
Yeah.
The plan pushes things like meats, lots of vegetables, the non-starchy ones, mainly healthy fats like olive oil, nuts, avocados, and only very limited fruit. It kind of forces you in eating unprocessed stuff.
And you really can't talk about this book without acknowledging the reaction. The success stories, the testimonials, they were everywhere. It really struck a chord.
Absolutely. Those anecdotes were incredibly powerful and fueled the book's success. People weren't just reporting weight loss, though many did lose significant amounts. They were talking about, joint pain vanishing, better sleep, feeling mentally sharper, way more energy, things they never thought were related to diet.
It's like a self-reinforcing cycle, isn't it? If you cut it out and feel amazing.
Exactly. Who needs a double-blind trial when your own experience feels so definitive?
Yeah.
That personal transformation narrative was key.
And that massive grassroots energy is why it became such a cultural phenomenon, right? It wasn't just a diet book. It arguably helped kickstart the whole mainstream gluten-free trend we still see everywhere.
No question. It tapped into a real public doubt about modern food processing and maybe conventional dietary wisdom. It gave people a single identifiable villain for a lot of complex health issues. Okay, but now we really need to pivot to the other side, the scientific pushback. Because while the story Davis tells is compelling, and those anecdotes are powerful, the mainstream scientific and nutrition communities were, well, let's say, highly skeptical.
What was the core criticism?
The main issue raised again and again is that Davis significantly overstates his case based on the available scientific evidence. Essentially, the consensus in nutrition science is that, yes, refined carbohydrates are a problem, but there's just not strong, conclusive evidence that wheat itself, uniquely and alone, is the toxic driver of obesity or the miracle cure for all these diseases he lists. The feeling was the conclusions leap way beyond what controlled studies actually show.
And that brings us to the methods, right? The sources point out a heavy reliance on his own clinical observations. How does that differ from, say, the gold standard research?
Right. Absorbing patterns in your own patients is great for forming a hypothesis, for asking questions, but it's not proof of causation. Think about it. When someone cuts out wheat, following his plan, they're also cutting out pizza, cake, cookies, beer, maybe sugary sodas, lots of processed snacks.
A whole lifestyle change, really.
Exactly. So when they feel better, how do you scientifically isolate wheat as the single cause? Critics argue Davis attributes all the benefits to ditching that one ingredient, when it's much more likely the benefit comes from ditching a whole category of highly processed, high-calorie, low-nutrient foods.
And this isn't just grumbling, right? There were formal reviews. Our sources mention one in the Journal of Cereal Science. What did they find?
Yeah, that review specifically looked at the claims about modern wheat being uniquely fattening or disease-causing. Their conclusion was pretty clear. There wasn't enough solid evidence to back that up, especially compared to the effects of just eating too many refined carbohydrates in general, whatever the source. The problem seemed to be refined carbs broadly, not some unique toxicity in wheat itself.
Okay, and stepping back from the science for a second, what about practical risks? If someone just decides to cut out all grains based on the book, are there nutritional downsides to worry about?
That's a really important practical concern. If you just eliminate all grains, especially whole grains, without careful planning, you could definitely run into nutrient deficiencies. Whole grains are major sources of dietary fiber, which is crucial for gut health, plus B vitamins like folate, thiamine, niacin, and minerals like magnesium and iron.
So you need to actively replace those.
Yes, absolutely. You'd need to be very deliberate about getting those nutrients from other sources, like lots of vegetables, legumes, maybe nuts and seeds.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might just be swapping one set of potential health issues for another. So we've got this picture. Massive popular enthusiasm on one side, significant scientific caution on the other. How do we bring this together? I think we have to start by acknowledging the kernel of truth Davis tapped into,
Which is
that the modern Western diet is a serious problem. It is overloaded with refined carbs and sugars. And his points about high glycemic foods jacking up insulin and promoting fat storage. That's basic, accepted metabolic science. The mechanism he describes is real.
Okay, so the how is largely correct, but the what pinning it all on wheat is the controversial part.
Precisely. And that leads to what most nutrition experts kind of synthesize from this. The dramatic positive results people report are almost certainly due to cutting out processed junk food and loads of refined carbs in general. The book works less like a specific guide against wheat and more like a really effective, highly motivating manifesto for switching to a low-carb, whole food way of eating.
That makes sense. If you stop eating fast food burgers, packaged snacks, sugary cereals, frozen pizzas, a lot of which happen to contain wheat, you're bound to feel better.
Right. Absolutely. Your calorie intake probably drops dramatically, your blood sugar stabilizes, your nutrient density likely goes up. It's the removal of the ultra-processed food matrix, not necessarily just the wheat protein within it, that's driving the big health shifts for most people.
And we absolutely have to include the counterpoint for balance. While Davis paints wheat with a very broad negative brush, the science does show that for many, maybe most people, whole grains are perfectly fine, even beneficial.
Exactly. Large population studies consistently link moderate intake of actual whole grains. Think intact grains like steel-cut oats, quinoa, brown rice, maybe truly whole wheat kernels with better heart health, improved metabolic function, and potentially lower risk of chronic diseases over the long term. So the all wheat is toxic for everyone message doesn't align with that broader evidence base. Hashtag key lessons.
Okay, let's try to boil this down. What are the key takeaways for you, the listener, from this deep dive? Lesson 1 seems clear. Tackling refined carbs works.
Right. Reducing processed wheat products, sugary drinks, sweets basically. Lowering your intake of high glycemic foods is a very solid strategy for stabilizing insulin and helping with weight management. That core principle holds up.
Lesson 2. That food addiction piece, the cravings, that resonates, doesn't it?
It really does. The idea that refined carbs can trigger reward pathways in the brain, leading to cravings and making moderation difficult, that's a valuable insight. Understanding that biochemical pull can be empowering for people struggling with certain foods.
Lesson 3 feels almost universal. Focus on real food.
Yep. Building your diet around unprocessed ingredients, vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats, fruits, is consistently linked to better health outcomes. That's probably the biggest positive outcome of the wheat belly approach, regardless of the specific wheat theory.
And finally, lesson 4, it's personal.
Absolutely critical. While the science doesn't support universal wheat elimination for everyone, individual responses vary hugely. If you have gut issues, inflammation, or just suspect a sensitivity, doing an elimination trial under guidance might be very revealing and beneficial for you. But blanket advice rarely fits everyone. Always think critically about how dietary advice applies to your own body and health. Hashtag tag Bella Satrag.
So Wheat Belly. It's undeniably a powerful book, a narrative that genuinely motivated millions to overhaul their diets, often with fantastic results. But as we've seen, it's a story that requires a healthy dose of scientific context. It's crucial to separate the compelling personal stories from the, let's say, less substantiated mechanisms.
Right. And that brings us to a final thought to leave you with. If, as the evidence suggests, most of the benefits people get from the wheat belly diet actually come from cutting out ultra-processed foods and sugar foods that just happen to often contain wheat, then does focusing so intensely on wheat as the single villain maybe distract us?
Interesting point.
Does blaming one ingredient divert attention from the bigger, maybe more complicated picture? The overall quality or lack thereof of the modern food system as a whole? Are there other single ingredient scapegoats out there stopping us from looking at the bigger picture? Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about. We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.